I'm like, you're going to spend 100 grand a year to go and build a network? Like, what are we talking about? It just
Right.
that never sat well with me because I was always it's like the network people are paying to go and get, I already have or could foster.
Hello and welcome back to the Get Stuff Done podcast. Today I'm joined by Chinedu Okeke, aka Chin, a Nigerian-born, British-educated entertainment entrepreneur. And he has graduated with a law degree from the University of Bristol, a diploma in Chinese from Tsinghua University in Beijing, and a diploma in brand storytelling from NYU. He began his entrepreneurial journey in 2010 when he established the Eclipse Group in Nigeria, focusing on live events, but diversifying into a successful brand agency. After a number of years growing that business, he took a spell in 2020 with Universal Group in Nigeria, before returning back to Eclipse once again relatively recently. He has been in that entrepreneurial area for some time, and that's why I thought he would be a great person to have on the podcast today. So, Chin, you're in London today. Thanks for being a guest on the podcast.
Thank you, Gordon. I think say good afternoon and good evening to you, right? It's afternoon here.
Indeed.
Thank you for the kind introduction. I, I think I was just thinking we actually met at Musk, right? So my corporate journey, there's this
Right.
journey of entrepreneur, corporate,
Yeah.
and
I
so
didn't
I
even
mean,
mention that part. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I had a stint at Musk in Shanghai and in Lagos, in shipping and the MICE program, as well as at Credit Suisse in New York. And I think my entrepreneurial journey actually started before 2010, right? It probably
Even
started
earlier.
when
It's
I
like
was,
officially establishing an entity, but yeah, I think that's
yes,
something you have in
establishing an
your
entity, right? So
yeah.
I mean, there was school like 2002, 2001, trading cigarettes and stuff, right?
Okay.
But and then supply demand, always understood that. And then there was at uni, I was a promoter, so I actually started promoting. Actually, I started promoting when I was at school. Started
Okay.
promoting when I was 15, 16, and then through uni did own not a registered company. Again, it wasn't like a registered company, but we ran some of the biggest nights in the UK across 4 or 5 cities. So
So
it's always been in my blood.
yeah. So looking back at essentially that's more than a 20-year period, right? I mean, it's essentially your late adolescence and then the entirety of your adult life. What is it that you think drives you? What is it that has led you to be always doing these things which are essentially extra to? I mean, obviously, it's not a day job when you're at school, but the main activity that you were focused on at that particular time. What led you to do all these things on the side?
I don't know if I ever considered them to be on the side. I just considered them to
Okay,
just be one of the many things that I was doing.
okay,
For me, there's never been this clear path. I wasn't one of those kids that you're like, what do you want to be when you grow up? Fireman, lawyer. Lawyer part was very much following the footsteps of my father.
hmm okay,
Um, but before that, it's always just been, I think, curiosity and opportunity, right? Satisfying needs of people, demand, and trying to meet those, right? For me, people, I've got a knack for, if I was to say I had one skill, it'd be people, right?
okay,
Is understanding people and being able to help find solutions to problems, especially problems people can't solve, right?
okay.
There's something that just excites me about being able to think through problems and solve them. There's that, like, we talked about this kind of with fatherhood, right? My impending new journey of fatherhood, which is probably the single most important journey or project I've taken next to marriage. But it's the one that doesn't have an end, right? And that's the beautiful thing about projects and starting stuff is there's always an end. So it's like, okay, what's the goal? What's the outcome I want? And then when it's done, it's done. You can move on or it evolves into the next one. And with fatherhood, I think I keep saying to people I'm an autopilot, and it's just like treating it every day as a project. Just get to the end of the day, and
Okay.
then it will be every month, and then it will be every like
Yeah.
3 and every 6, and then I don't know, just little projects. And over the years, I found myself doing a lot because there's a lot of problems to solve around you, right? So whether it's my day job or it's helping someone else, or there's always been many things, and obviously with this new journey, it's been easier to just filter out and focus on a few, right?
Yeah.
But yeah,
It changes
curiosity and
perspectives. Yeah,
yeah,
for
but
sure.
curiosity and opportunity, I think, is what drives me the most.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about the current status of your business and what is it that you're working on right now?
I don't know how to answer that question because
Okay.
the best way to answer that question is I've been on sabbatical. So I know that you
Okay.
said post, and it's what it says in my profile, post Universal, I've returned to
Yeah.
Eclipse, right? Sitting on the board, not operational. Um, I took time out post Universal, needed time out, and then got married, and then my wife got pregnant, and so that's kind of been my where the business is, right? Is
Okay.
there.
Yeah. Yep. Okay.
But there is. I say all that to say that very much been in development phase, planning, right? I've had a thesis that I've been testing. Well, it's why I went to Universal, right? I thought that being at Universal with all the resources and how large a company it was, and Universal Music, not because there's obviously Universal Films and
Yep.
studios, but
Yep.
Universal Music, that after being in the music industry for the last 10, 15 years in Nigeria, jumping onto the other side might be the way to try and solve a lot of the problems, right? And then you get in and you realize that, yeah, it doesn't really work like that. Not everybody wants to change and fix everything. And
Okay.
so, ironically, I find myself leaving and realizing after a while that actually a lot of those problems I can solve as an independent, as an entrepreneur. So
Okay.
in the process of, it's taken 2 years to go from a 18 to 20 page concept note to 3 pages, right?
Of a
And
phase
very,
two of the business, essentially a kind of a 2.0 post
yeah,
post.
I would say it's the phase two, phase three, phase four. It's like a,
Okay. The
not just
start of.
music at the, yeah,
Okay.
it's music, the start of building ecosystem, being able to, yeah, build a sustainable ecosystem that is pretty much driven by building infrastructure,
Okay.
um, digital and physical infrastructure.
Okay.
Um, it's a capital play. So it's maybe 6 months at the end of the year. By Q4, we start raising. We'll hit the road again in 2025. It's
Okay.
a number of different projects across music and the value chain, where it's recording, publishing, live, tech, media, and a fund. Um,
And this is primarily based in Nigeria. This is mostly
yeah.
centered around the entertainment industry and live music scene of Nigeria. Is that right?
So it's based in Nigeria, not just the live music. Live music is just one vertical, but
Okay.
across the whole. So I mean, I my background was live, right, and then I went in Universal, ended up being managing director across the whole business, and realizing that my skills were transferable not just for live, but recording, publishing, and yes, Nigeria is our starting point. Then it looks like probably Africa. But what we found is that the solution that we're solving is not just a Nigerian problem, right?
Okay.
It's not just an African problem. It's an industry-wide problem where there's a gap between capital and the industry, right? Bridging that gap. And then for new markets like Nigeria, it's building a sustainable ecosystem. And in developed markets, it's trying, I guess, it will look like, if we ever get there, is defining what the new ecosystem looks like, because the old one has kind of capped out, right?
Right.
Growth is
Okay.
declining. There's a need to develop a fair and equitable ecosystem for music. Yeah.
How I don't want this. I don't know whether this to be too complicated a question, but how would you compare and contrast doing business in London to Lagos? What were some of the first things that pop in your mind when?
Um, I've never, well, I do kind of work, but I've never worked full time in the UK. But I'm very aware of what
Okay.
it is. And part of the reason why I chose to live in Nigeria, it was either going to be the Far East or Africa, versus the West, is the ability to build something, right? In the West, in pretty much any industry, it's saturated, right? A lot of
Okay.
problems have been solved. All we're trying to do is improve solutions rather than innovate, right?
Right.
I,
It's
I do love,
incremental. Right.
right? It's percentages, it's single digit percentages.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
double, triple,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
The beautiful thing about Nigeria is that it's a blank canvas. I think the things that I've been able to do in Nigeria, I could do in the UK, could do in the US. It would be a lot, not harder, but I would be less driven to do that, because chances are someone else has done it, right? You'd just
Right.
be trying to do it better.
Less impactful.
Um, Less impactful, very much so. Obviously, may not be as uh, economically rewarding, but much more rewarding in terms of actual impact and value add.
Okay. And what about you mentioned Africa, obviously a lot of diverse countries within that. Are there adjacent, very similar stepping stone markets which would be an easy extension from Nigeria, or do they, in each in
No,
their own right? Not really.
each in their own right, very different, very
Okay.
unique. Um, I've been lucky enough, privileged enough over the last 15 years to explore, work, and collaborate across the continent. In doing that, our strategy, if Africa was the next phase, our strategy would be very much driven by partnership. So we have a partner that's a fund in Kenya, right? I
Okay.
think the value we would bring, aside from our experience, is very much bridging the gap between capital and the industry.
Okay.
Um, the creative, and I say music, but it's also just kind of inclusive of the whole creative industries, where it's this great talking point everyone's excited about, but people, especially institutions, know very little about, whether it's regulatory, whether it's financial institutions, whether it's development agencies. It's exciting, it's great to talk about, but have you got the right products? Do you understand it? Are you able to deploy capital to ensure that there's the right impact? Um, that's where we want to fill
Okay.
the gap, and act as a catalyst for growth in that industry.
Okay. I want to take us in a totally different direction. This week, the second week of April 2024, there's been a total eclipse across the US, and it's been, creating a lot of excitement for people in that region. The name of your company is Eclipse, and I want to know about the origin of the name, if you will. Where does Eclipse come from?
Um, Eclipse was, so building brands, right? We wanted to, rather than being at the forefront, we wanted to be responsible for building phenomenal moments, right? Phenomenal brands that we weren't known for. We were known for the brand. So you see something, you're like, who did that? And it would be like, let's look behind. It's like an eclipse
Mm-hmm.
has this.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
a phenomenon that is just so mysterious, but
Mm-hmm.
a, like you said, in America this whole week, everybody's just been glaring at it. But there's this sense of like, it's still hidden. it's hiding, and that it's never been about me, right? So for the last 15 years, as a list of artists, festivals, projects, brands that I've played pivotal roles in building,
Yeah.
in
Yep.
creating. Um, uh, Most of the work I've done has been by referral or because of what they've seen us do, not because we're out here marketing gin,
Okay.
right?
Interesting.
Um, Interestingly enough, in this evolution, and ironically, Eclipse will continue to exist, but there's a different. So, but
Yeah.
I think for sustainability and for my own well-being is if I'm going to put that kind of energy into something, it should be an extension of myself, right? And building more.
100,000%. I think earlier when you were talking about projects having a finite end, what I was thinking about in that moment was yes, but also let's do something that we don't want to ever end, that we want to just keep doing forever, that sustainability. And I think that when, that intersection, that of your kind of, I mean, maybe people say it's like your true path, or, you can put different wrappers on it,
Yeah,
but essentially an extension of yourself, like you said, I think is definitely the way it works, and that's
I,
for me. That's what, in a sense, GSD is. GSD is me, Gordon Stewart Dudley. It's also get stuff done, which somebody said, "Hey, Gordon, you love to get stuff done." Hey, that's GSD. That's also my initials. Let's
it's
put it
how do
out
you,
there. So
it's almost like how do you scale yourself, right? So I think that I would like to look at it as the last 20 years to being almost like honing skills and experience and building and discovering oneself because we don't always know what our purpose is, right?
for sure, for sure.
And you spend so long, especially if you're a projects guy, you're just doing, just get it done, da da da,
Yep,
right? Get
yep,
stuff done.
yep.
You never really ask yourself. It's just like we just do it, and everyone's like, "Man, you just get stuff done." Never ask how, right? What's going on in your head? My wife's just like, you have to realize not everyone, your brain works very different, right?
Yeah,
And it's not just about multitasking. The thing is finite. We finish it, right? Then you get to a point, hopefully, I don't think everyone gets there, but you hope you get to a point where you're no, because it does drain you when you're putting so much into everyone else and a bunch of projects that don't align with your purpose, don't mean anything to you,
yeah,
actually.
for
I don't
sure.
know if you're the same, but like I would finish a project and I could move straight on. There was no moment where I'd be like, you know, it would be done, have a drink, on to the next one. I want to do less projects and I want to savor every project I do because I feel like I've achieved something that has real impact, right? And I can look back at it and I've never been great at like looking back and like I've spent the last 2 years refining my profile, having some of my team help me and they'll be reminding me of stuff I've done and I'm like, really? I mean, if it didn't really have anything to do with you, why would you remember, right? And so I've just chosen that the next 20, 30, 40, I want to remember all of it. I want to make sure that every project is important to me. And I believe that, like, my life coach will say that if it's important to you, then it's important to people, right? If it's important to you, the impact it will have will be tremendously larger than just because you did it.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I
yeah,
fully agree. I think people who are listening to this won't be seeing how much my head is nodding along as Chin's speaking, because I fully agree with everything he said. People watching on YouTube will just be seeing me frantically nodding along as you're speaking there, and so I think that's absolutely great that we share a similar kind of outlook on how to approach life. So, what would you say? I know that you've literally just said that from now on you want everyone to be meaningful, everyone to enjoy and be memorable. What would be the most memorable one that you've done up to this point, would you say?
my son,
Say again?
my son.
Okay.
Um, I mean,
Some would
man,
say putting it into the terms of a project is maybe a little bit
it's a
disconnected.
lifetime project. No,
Okay.
it's a
Okay.
lifetime project. I feel like you just happened. If you ask me this in 2 years, it might be different.
Yeah.
If you asked me a year ago, um, I do believe that where I am now is a culmination of life experiences and projects, right? And each one has kind of prepared me for this. There's no
For sure.
manual,
Yeah.
right? Projects, you can take processes and make sure that next time we don't have to do it all over again. There's no manual. Everyone's done this, but you have to figure this one out. And I keep referencing being an autopilot, but autopilot shouldn't negate the fact that you know what you're doing. You just don't know it. All of the practice you've had, remember I said the last 20 years of honing your skills, suddenly you get to put it into action for something that you care about, that is meaningful. And every day, like my wife says, it's like everything's changing. How you were supposed to change diapers yesterday, today is different. And like I'm
Yeah.
just and something similar with me with music. I hadn't managed any artists for 8 years, and I started managing this girl called Samadina. And for me, that was the excitement of doing something that felt meaningful and being able to pour years of experience into something that wasn't about money, was about, I believe in this, right? And so, yes, the short answer is my son, because I wholeheartedly believe in him. And I believe that, like, the outcome of that, when he hits it, will, it's again, it's the longest committed project that I'm in, right? Um, and so that, but then work wise, man, there's so many. I think Gidi Fest, the music
Hmm.
festival that we started in 2014, which for the most part in the music industry is what most people know me for, because it's probably been the largest, but it's not even about being the largest. Over the years, I spent the last 18 months consulting for the UNDP about how development agencies should invest and support the creative industries. I've never been a development kind of guy. uh, I don't know, government, not me. But what I did realize was if you wanted to build anything of scale, if you wanted to have the utmost impact, it was important to understand that world. The head of the UNDP convinced me and made me see it differently. And the way he broke down the festival, right? So first of all, it was like, we want to support the festival. I was like, why?
Okay.
And he broke it down with impact, right? So SDG goals. And he was like, the training that you do, the impact for the small businesses, right? Our festival was the one festival in Lagos that every food vendor sold out. It's the one festival that I can list 10 people who've been through our training program as far back as 2014 who all have achieved or become something of note in the industry, right? Either they ended up in full-time jobs and have just risen, or
Mm.
have become, official football photographer for the Nigerian football team and FIFA, or, is has, you know, has political ambitions and might run for House of Reps, but they all came through. And for me, yeah, Giddy, because of I can see the impact through other people.
Right.
That's probably
Yep.
been the biggest project for me to date, because even though it has not happened since 2020, 19 actually, 20, we got run out by the pandemic. We had to cancel. A, the lockdown was a week before the festival was going to happen. Um, and even though it hasn't, the impact of it is live and well, right? Through individuals, through the culture, where the work of our hands really is visible to see. And if it never happened again, it's still, yeah, there's people who will say that where they are is because of that, is because of
Right.
us. Um, and, you'll hear this from me a lot. Is like, for me, it's about impact. It's about value, not monetary. The money will
Right.
come, but it's
Yeah.
about how you impact and change people's lives.
And it sounds like that particular thing has also legacy, and that's
Yes.
something that endures, right? And obviously, legacy is also used quite often with when we're talking about children as well, of course, as our legacy. Okay, now. uh, I mentioned in your introduction that you also graduated from Tsinghua University. Um,
Yes.
how did that come about? How long did you spend there? Tell us a little bit about that experience.
China.
Black man in
Curiosity,
China.
curiosity and opportunity. I created the opportunity, but the curiosity was, I think if we're honest with ourselves, 20 years ago, we already, if you were paying attention, there was a shift power dynamic from the West to the East, right? Um, China understanding the power of the human capital, positioning globally, and how it's evolved. Remember what made in China was synonymous with, right? And where it is today. 20 years. So I was always curious. I'm a languages person: Spanish, French, Italian, Spanish A levels, French, Italian, GCSE. Love languages more so as a way to learn about people, culture, right? Um, Black man in China. I had after finishing law at Bristol. No, I'll get there because when I said that, I was like, yeah, black man in China. It was such an interesting experience, but had dinner with the Heapses. Peter Heap was the UK ambassador in Nigeria when I was growing up. After I finished at Bristol, I had dinner with him and his wife. Their son was in China in the 90s in the Bull Run, right? And his story just fascinated me. So I went home that night and I applied to Beijing University, Tsinghua University. So those two are kind of like your Oxford and Cambridge of China.
Okay.
Tsinghua has a partnership with Oxford. And I was like, look, if I'm going to convince my parents that I'm not going to go and do my LPC, what better to be like, I'm going to go learn Chinese at the Oxford in China. And so I applied, went away for the summer, came back, and I had a place at both. Took the place in Tsinghua, cancelled my LPC, and got on a plane and moved to China. Had never been. Some say I was running away. It was nice to be 9 hours away from everybody and be somewhere that no one knew you. Because as I said, I spent my formative years at school as a promoter, and everyone knows you. You're in the center of everything. And China was a great place for people to start again, right? And I had no intentions of being there long term. It was 6 months. Went for 6 months, Beijing, and then I had a stint. I didn't want to leave. Had a stint. I fell in love. Had a stint working for a VC that ISAC. They had a furniture company. They were Scandinavian, and I got the license for 20 states in the US of my uncle who's in New Orleans and in furniture. It's basically like IKEA, but when you walk into a house, IKEA, it's IKEA. And this was like IKEA, but you had like 40 options of upholstery. So like I wouldn't go into your house and see what I had, right? And
Right.
it was perfect, although then the crash came, and so that kind of blew us out. And then I was milling around looking for an opportunity to stay in China, and that's how I came across Maersk in one of their like networking things. You remember that the MyC program you had to start in your home country, right? And I was
Mm.
able to convince them to let me do my first year in China and my second year in Nigeria based on the future of Sino-Africa trade, right? What
Okay.
better to have someone who understands both?
Yeah.
Moved to Shanghai, probably one of the best years of my life. I mean, I was 22, had a full-time job, was paid well. Um, that was the peak of the bull run. Like it was pre-Olympics, and everybody was flying. It was great. Very multicultural in Shanghai versus Beijing. Beijing, I had only Chinese friends, and then I was going to go back to the black man in China. When I went to China, my cousin said to me, "Don't worry, wherever you go, there's going to be hip hop and a Nigerian." My first weekend in Shanghai, in Beijing, in Wudalco, the student district, I went to the club, and it was owned by a Nigerian, and it was a hip hop club. It's like, don't worry, I'm going to be fine. Um, but people always asked, was it racist? Was it this? And I'd never seen it as racist. I felt like China was closed for so long that they didn't understand anything that didn't look like them, right? So they were always, it's more curiosity and fascination of just like, who are you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
they would look the same as like, Latin Americans or even white. It was just and then for black people, that was just another thing for them. But they were very smart. At that time, remember Yao Ming, the basketball player?
Yeah.
They had gotten
Yeah.
the rights to the NBA, and they were using the NBA as a way to sensitize, because obviously pre-Olympics. So I'd get into a cab and they'd be like, Kobe Bryant, you know Kobe Bryant? And that would break the ice, right? Because
Right.
automatically they had a reference point for
Right.
this straight. So I had a fantastic time, moved back to Nigeria. But China really, I think, molded, not molded, I'd say influenced how I see the world. That there are different systems. We don't have to apply the same system. Like you just talked about Africa, it's not what the solution works in Nigeria doesn't work in every country. We have this idea that democracy is the only system that works. I saw capitalist communism work effectively. As I said, China in 20 years has become the superpower, right? In what everybody used to talk about, made in China, quality of goods, poor. In 20 years, they've become a force to reckon with, culturally, commercially, in global politics, right? And I didn't want to be on the losing side, right? I was just like, listen, if that's the way we're going, I want to make sure I can always, um, and yeah, and I came back to Nigeria, and over the first 8 years, I did a lot with China back and forth. But yeah, China, it was a great time. I need to go
And
back.
and there you are. You said that you weren't quite sure the whole you're not anything to do with the UN, but then the future of Sino-African relations that you mentioned there. So there was something from the early days in that global geopolitics that
I think
was in there.
I think there's always has been. I listen. I People joke about it and will say, "When are you going to run for office?" I'm very passionate about where I'm from. I'm very passionate about people. Right? You can't be passionate about people and run away from politics or run away from governing. Right? But being Nigerian, and having seen and experienced um, broken systems,
Hmm.
corrupt systems, it can leave a very sour taste in one's mouth where you don't want to participate, right? And that's not just Nigeria, it gives you a view of how this works globally, right? As I've grown older, I've learned to not be scared of it. If you have to participate, you can't just have views and opinions. So, yeah, geopolitics, how we govern ourselves, how we build for ourselves. As I said to you, if you're going to build anything of scale to have real impact, governance is super important. You can't walk away from it. If you don't have regulatory um, tools in place to sustain anything you do, then it dies with you. There's no legacy. And these are things. Honestly, if we had this conversation 5 years ago, I'd say, I don't care. like,
Mm.
but again, the generation before us, our parents' generation in Nigeria, very much said, "This is my problem," and that's how Nigeria is where it was. Right? Is because a generation decided not to participate, and was focused solely on private sector, and therefore it was left to its own demise. Right? So there's a sense of responsibility that comes with it for me.
Mm.
I believe with privilege comes great responsibility. Um, and going back to that legacy thing you said is I do believe this life is not ours, right? We're here to create and build for those who come after us. Um, and so, yeah, governance is a huge part of it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very interesting. What you said there about the generation saying that it wasn't their problem, and then it's led to um, problems down the road. And I do think that, I mean, even just we've just had the national elections here in Korea yesterday. It's a huge year for the entire world, with I think more than 50 national elections happening in major countries around the world. I think those
I think
combined
it's
50.
65%. It's something like 65% of the world population will vote this year.
Right, yeah, exactly. It's a really huge amount. So, what we've just seen here in Korea is the opposition party has taken majority, and that means for the remainder of the presidency that not a lot will get done because we have a president on one side and a majority of parliament on the other, and obviously they don't like to work together. So that's how things will be for the next few years until we see some change.
And then you'll come this way, and then it'll be the UK elections.
Right? I mean, who knows? Who knows? In terms of leadership, though, yeah, that's obviously public sector leadership, which sometimes people go into that not necessarily for the right reasons. But you've been obviously in various leadership positions within the working environment. How would you describe your own personal leadership style?
I get asked this, and it's just I always struggle to answer this question. I'm goal orientated. I've learned to be more inclusive. I still even learned to be more inclusive. I value, especially if I've built the team around me. Right? I think when you go into corporate, you don't always get to choose the people around you. So you're forced to work with people who add no value. Sure, some of them will feel like I'm not inclusive. If I value your skill and your tools and you're on my team, the reason you're there is because I don't have those skills, right? Or at least I think that you're better. And in that way, I'm very much a collective. I have a collective approach to solving problems. Over the years, I've learned that as much as I can probably solve most problems all on my own, I can get it done quicker, more effectively by leaning on and collaborating with the team around me. It's something that obviously at my company, we had a small team, everybody knew the roles they played. It was quite daunting going into Universal because I hadn't been in that kind of leadership position. I was taking on areas of the business I'd never worked in. And I surprised myself, right? I went into it, clean house, brought in a team, upskilled, trained, and I think one thing one piece of advice I was given was let them make mistakes, right? Trust in your team, because you can then apply yourself to more strategy and be able to build rather than trying to do all the nitty gritty. Collectively, I do like the idea of kind of family when it comes to work. Interestingly enough, it's not like we do everything together, but there's a trust amongst the team. We're not going to work to do redundant things, right? I feel like it's important for everybody to know the why they're doing something. I've learned over the years to also take time out to explain, especially because generations, not everybody just does what you tell them, right? They want to understand why they're doing it. And so it's it's been a journey. I think, yeah, my leadership style has become much more inclusive and collective. Um, Whereas I will reference one of our experiences in the MICE when we were in Copenhagen. You know, our 400 of the MICE group was what, 99th percentile of applicants, right? So all pretty amazing people. You throw them all into a room and they all think they're the best. But then they'd put us in groups, and after doing like case studies, would then be like, I want you to tell each of you what you think about each other, right? And a very humbling experience when you're being critiqued about your almost narcissistic way of doing things because we all believed we were the best, right? And that was my turning point. Honestly, that was what, 2008, right? 7, 8.
7, 8, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. To You're not the best in the room. And even if you are, and I used to say this to my team at Universal, I was like, I can do everything. The reason I'm here is because I can, but I'm not here to do everything, right? We all have a role to play.
Yeah.
but it's also made me realize that there's a lot of education that has to be done when it comes to teamwork, right? I think that especially in a corporate environment, people just go into roles with an expectation that doesn't necessarily align with the overarching strategy or expectations. And so you need to take time out with everyone on your team to get everyone on the same side so you can all pull in the right direction.
Yeah.
And that leader that will take time to educate, right? I don't expect that everybody has all the tools. And if I can't do it, then just making sure you have the tools, whether it's training outside of work, mentorship internally. Something we set up at Universal was, the team we put in place had never worked at a corporate label before. They were all great staff, but they'd never worked the systems. So we had kind of like buddy systems with Korea, UK labels, US labels, where their counterparts would be able to kind of teach them how things were done internally. Yeah, I don't know if there's a word for that. I'm probably sure there is in like MBA lingo, like type of leader. Drop down, pick. Yeah.
Have you, talking of MBAs, did you ever consider doing an MBA? Was that ever something you thought you might want to do?
I always struggled with the idea of an MBA. Why? Because why should I do an MBA? I always thought that it was my reason if I was going to do an MBA would be a great opportunity to learn from people similar to the MICE program, people on par with you who have different approaches to solving the same problem and learning about the different solutions that you would never have thought about. Now, that's how I would see it. But then you ask people who go to Harvard and SAIAD and all of these. And by the way, I've done what are those things? Not SATs. Is it SATs?
GMAT.
GMATs, right? Did the research and all of it. But I was like, I asked people and everyone was always like, the networking, your network. I'm like, you're going to spend $100,000 a year to go and build a network? Like, what are we talking about? That never sat well with me because I was always, it's like the network people are paying to go and get, I already have or could foster, right? If I was going to do that, I wanted to learn, and that's how I would want to learn, is to just see how other people's minds work. And I've done, we've done it a couple of times. What I'll do is put myself in spaces where I have an opportunity to, I'll go to like a VC retreat in New York. I'll get invited to spaces that are out of my comfort zone. So the last one I went to was in New York in 2020 after I'd left Universal. Tech, like I'm not in the tech world, but also just startups. And it was a 4-day weekend with founders and investors, not formal, just like workshopping. And that, I learned so much in those 4 days, right? That really kind of formed a lot of my thinking over the last couple of years. Yeah.
So that's brain food. What about physical side of things? How do you keep physically healthy? Do you have a routine around that? No.
Right.
Good DNA.
I have terrible DNA. Listen, I just I have to have my body's a mess. It should be much better. At my age, I used to be very high performance, swimming, running, gym, all of that, to a point that like I had knee surgery, ankle surgery, my back. And I just got to a point where I realized I wasn't competing. I wasn't going to the Olympics. And so I just kind of took a back seat. I'll go for walks. It's just like my thing is just being more mobile. In Lagos, I'll go for a walk 3 days a week, go for a swim twice a week. It's very light work. It's not high octane. Since the pregnancy, there was a lot of daddy weight.
Happens to us all. To us all.
So spring is coming, and I'm just gonna.
Spring has come.
I think the physical, they talk about the physical and the mental and spiritual. just the walks and just being able to get out and do 5K a day, and just having time to myself is just, I think, the most important thing. And just stretching. I do
Hmm.
yoga. I'll do my 20 minutes yoga
Okay.
every other day. That's it. Yeah,
Well,
nothing.
yeah. So I'm 9 years into parenthood, and twice now, right? So my daughter's 9, my son's 6, and there. I think now it's a new phase, maybe initiated a little bit by they get ever more independent, right? But I found a new interest and strong inclination towards physical fitness within the last year, and so that's something that now I'm very focused on myself, and it's definitely well, I don't know where my mental health would be if I didn't have it. So I can't say how much of an impact it is, other than that I feel really good
How was
doing
the
it.
mental
So,
health before?
well, yeah, that's the thing. I can't really analyze maybe how bad it really was. I kind of just realize I'm in a much better place now. Um, so.
What are you doing for physical fitness?
F45. If you
What's
come across that, it's very like CrossFit,
Okay.
but it's F is for functional, so it's functional fitness. So it's really based around body weight exercise. 45 for 45 minutes per workout, and that's led me to hybrid fitness races called High Rocks, and so that otherwise I'm just exercising all the time. What's the point? So
It's
similar to
why.
you.
It's the why. It's
Right,
like I don't
right,
want to just go to the gym. I don't
right,
like no.
right.
What am I working towards? And I like that you.
Exactly. Goal
It's
oriented.
Listen. My
Yep.
brother-in-law, the CrossFit monkey gym thing is big now in Lagos. But what I do like is one community, and so what it is like people. It's not just you and yourself in the gym with your headphones on. It's become a community thing. Then they started to do some competition. There's some people who do flag football. I think at our age, you know, it there has to be a reason and beyond just like keeping fit.
Sure.
Otherwise,
It's
my fear is that, and this is actually my biggest fear about doing anything, doing too much is sustaining it, right?
mm,
It's like if there's no
yeah.
reason beyond keeping fit, it can easily do this, right? It's up and down. Yeah.
Right, right. And also it's a much bigger trade-off. Like the more responsibilities we have in and out of work, it's a bigger trade-off to devote that amount of time to doing that. And so having High Rocks as an event, as a goal where I'm going to try to do as as best as I possibly can has been really good.
Just don't
Good for
try
me.
and compete with those people that are half your age. You'll hurt yourself.
Well, there are age categories, so I am in my respective age category, but no, I mean they're inspirational, right? I mean, it doesn't matter the age, because there's people who are much older than me who are better than me, and there's people much younger than me who are better than me. So I just look to them, whatever their age, to try to be as good as I possibly can. That's what I take home. But no, I fully understand. New fatherhood, new parenthood is not. It's not the first thing on your mind. I fully get that. Those initial few weeks are
Well, they
pretty
do say that
intense.
it's important that you do find. I just left a friend of mine. I was like, find the time. Make sure that you do take care of yourself, right? I think we are so used to as fathers being an autopilot that we forget to take care of ourselves. And you can only take care of them if you're in, like you said, physical, mental, spiritual. Um, I've also just, I think those first few weeks it's difficult. You have to let everything kind of settle, right?
Oh, for
Find
sure.
its place,
Yeah,
and then find
yeah,
where you can slip in the 45 minutes and the
yeah.
hour.
Right.
um, yeah, man, it's
Indeed.
fun. Yeah.
health is very important. And I think on that note, we'll probably wrap it up. Chin, I think we've covered a very broad range of topics. I'm not going to try to summarize them all here, but thank you so much for sharing some of your insights today.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. I thought you had this question that you asked me. It was like about um, getting stuff done.
Getting stuff done. You are right. You being a very diligent guest. The key question I do always ask is about how you get stuff done, and let's make that the last question of this episode.
It is interesting because, again, you've heard me speak to it in many ways over the last hour. A year or two ago, I would have answered that as in just get up and go, just get it done, just do it, right? Just do it. But as we spoke about, that doesn't necessarily fulfill you. That leaves you at some point feeling like, I don't want to do it today. My advice would be to take a step back and ask why. Why? Doesn't matter how small, how large the project is. Why am I doing it? Personally, how does it key in? Macro, how does it key into the bigger strategy? Gosh, it sounds very Gen Z. It's like, why? I want to know why. I want to know why. But it's something to learn from them, because sometimes some people, they'll tell you, I'm struggling to start this project or start this business, and they'll just be like, just leap. And sometimes the reason why you're struggling to start is you don't have the confidence that you're ready. You're not ready a lot of the time. And sometimes you need to take a step back to refine the why. Like I said to you, it's taken me 2.5 years to get to, aside from leaving Universal and dealing with that and just mentally, and then marriage and this, as clear as I thought my idea was when I left Universal, I needed the last couple of years to be confident in my why, especially because of the long-term view of it. So that, mine would be take a step back. It could be a second, it could be a day, it could be a year, but I think that there's much more value and impact in a project when you can answer the why.
Absolutely, 100%. I think that definitely helps to induce the sustainable element that we talked about before, let alone the initiation that you just mentioned. So that is then the end of the final question. So thank you for being a very diligent guest and making sure that we covered that one as we do in every episode. Thanks so much, Chin.
Thank you for having me, Gordon. Good night, I guess, for you.
Indeed, it's good night from Seoul, and to everybody, thank you for watching this episode. Let's get stuff done.